Yo, everybody, how's it going? I'm just waiting for them to finish his AI songs over there on his side, and then I'll open the scene up. But I'm not gonna torture you with this. I mean, I guess I could at least get the screen set. Let me see what we got here. Talk straight. Watch it break on me. He's playing AI music right now. Actually, you guys can hear it. You can hide in a wall of text. No gish gallopog, no. Here. There you go. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I literally just hit you guys with terrible music from over there. I'm sorry. L's in the chat for Jim Bob. Is this Tony? No, it's not Tony. That's not Tony. What an insult. What an insult. Whose channel? It's Breakfast Tacos. So he's making AI music and sharing it with the world, and it's, you know, we got to listen to it. See, it's all like that. I can't. I won't. I will not. Yeah, it ain't no cringecore, that's for sure. And he said he's going to play. I mean, this is a terrible idea from Breakfast Tacos, but he's like, okay, before we start the debate, we're just going to stream, and it's going to be 5 minutes of song. And I'm like, please no? Please not that? Oh, I got a beer, though, so that's good. Did he just drop the N-word? What's up, Bass Dad? So we're just waiting. I guess we need a timer, you know? We need a timer. 5 minutes. Here, this is nice. This is nicer.
If it's 1v1 bloodbath engage. Step in polite, state your topic, no hate.
All right, no, I want to expose you to this. You guys have to deal with this. You got to go through this with me.
Fog, premise, conclusion, clean line. If it doesn't follow, it don't
You have to deal with this with me.
Don't filibuster, don't posture, don't whine. Answer the question the first time, on time. We don't do sermon dumps, we don't do books and book. If it's self-evident, demonstrated, that'll be understood. You can disagree, that's fine, just keep it in frame. Argue the point, not the person, not the tone, not the name. Clock on the wall, mic in your...
Did he, like, put in, like, black guy voice? Like, did he put that in? Like, it needs to be a black guy. Is it half black?
Get in the line, get it clean, get it fine, get ready. Talk too messy, get muted, act wild, get petty.
Let's just turn it down a little bit. Let's split the difference. There we go. I thought you liked this, Emmy. Oh, you're black, Emmy. No, I love you guys. I just don't want to live by you. I should pay. Yeah. Super chats, stop the music. Super chats, stop the music. That's funny. Are we being punished? Yeah. I'm holding you hostage. I'm holding your mind hostage. Give no quarter. No. Not a single quarter. Okay? It's terrible. If it's terrible music, wouldn't it necessitate for the sheet music? Sheet music. Nice, Chase. Chase coming in with a dad joke. Sheet music. This is Suno? Definitely Suno or something. Something Suno. It's got to be. Usually gives the black voice if you ask Suno. Really? Hip-hop? It's just like that? That's how it is? Say mega bloodbat.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. All of our brothers and sisters in atheism out there. Appreciate you all being here. We've got an exciting debate today between two titans of internet debate. We've got Jim Bob and made by Jim Bob and Leophilius, who are both two amazing debaters. You should be very excited tonight. They're debating the topic, does physicalism make knowledge impossible? Jim Bob is taking the affirmative. Leophilius is taking the negative. Let's go ahead and get into this. There's going to be 8-minute openings, an hour-long open discussion with up to an additional hour based on super chats. If there's $60 in super chats, so up to an additional minute per dollar, we'll do up to an additional hour. So I expect about 2 hours in open discussion, and then we'll have an 8-minute closing. After that, we'll have an open panel where people can come up and ask questions to our debaters. Y'all ready to get into this? Y'all have anything? Also, let's get some introductions. I always forget to do the introductions. Jim Bob, you should do a quick introduction for yourself. Sure. And then Leophilius, since he's the negative. Let's get into that, and then we'll go ahead and start the debate here.
Okay, I'm made by Jim Bob. My channel's made by Jim Bob.
You're muted, Jim Bob.
Oh, wait. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm made by Jim Bob. My channel's made by Jim Bob on YouTube. I'm at by Jim Bob on X. Political cartoonist, commentary, do all sorts of creative stuff like that. And I do a lot of reviews and pseudo debates on my own channel. So go check it out. Give it a follow.
And Leophilius?
Yeah, it's your boy Leophilius in his house, open the flippity floppity floop. Anyway, on a serious note, yeah, I'm Leophilius. My channel is called Leophilius. I occasionally post content. I'm hoping that by this spring I can get some stuff in my schedule with work and other things that I do a little bit more solidified and start posting a little bit more regularly. But I do post to my channel. I focus mainly on philosophy. The areas would be metaphysics, philosophy of science, metaphysics of science, philosophy of physics, and then I do a lot of content related to both cosmology and quantum mechanics as well. I'm no expert, but I think I know enough to know what I'm talking about. It seems that I know what I'm talking about. Some experts have told me that I know what I'm talking about. So you should go check me out if those things interest you.
Perfect. Thank you for the amazing introductions there. I am waiting for all right, we got the clock up here. Sorry about that, just resetting one of these timers. We've been doing a bunch of open panels. So we've got the timer set for 8 minutes. Jim Bob, let me know when you're ready, and we'll go ahead and get your opening statement up here, or take your opening statement.
All righty, let's do it. All right, so is knowledge impossible under physicalism? I say yes. By knowledge, we mean justify true belief. By physicalism, we mean the view that everything that exists is concrete. By concrete, we mean material. Justified true belief is when a person S knows that a proposition P is true if and only if all three of the following conditions are met. S believes that P is true. Obviously, you have to believe something first to know if it's a justified true belief. 2, that it is in fact true, that you test it in some way that it is true, and it's justified in believing it, that it's true based on supportive evidence and argumentation or whatever else. And so there are some key aspects of this view that have some major problems. One is, if knowledge is synonymous with justified true belief, then justified true beliefs are concrete in nature. That is to say, their ontology exists as material in the world physically. 2, a method is required for coming to justified true beliefs, which includes evaluations and propositions. This is a problem because evaluations and propositions under physicalism would also be concrete. They'd either be a collection of materials or concrete items, some mechanistic thing in motion that's happening. That's how that would work inside the brain. Another aspect of the problem is that if justified true belief exists as a concrete matter in the brain, then false beliefs also exist in the brain as concrete matter. How does physicalist or physicalism itself delineate between a false belief and a justified true belief if both share the same material status in the brain? That would be to say that one material grouping, justified true belief, has some unique quality to it, aboutness, that is distinct from the false collection of beliefs. If it's the same category, you need some sort of methodology to figure out which one's true, which one's false, if it's just pure material. My opponent might say, well, that's easy. We just test them with reality. Well, first of all, reality is a metaphysical term. Reality is a concept. So concepts, do they exist under physicalism? If so, where is the material called a concept? But further, when they say I'll test them with reality, being that would be one of the criterion for justified true belief, the act of testing itself is a concrete set of objects in the world occurring mechanistically in the brain, which would include an accurate test and an inaccurate test. So when I ask someone, how do you determine a set of matter that's true, called knowledge in the brain, called justified true belief, as material in the brain, from the false one, he says, well, we'll test it. But the problem is there's inaccurate and accurate testing. So you have the same problem. Inaccurate testing and accurate testing would also happen in the brain, in the material brain, as material product of just the brain happening. So keep in mind that the phrase test with reality invokes an abstraction called reality, as I said. The abstractions must also exist. Now, I don't know if my opponent will say, well, they do exist, but they're not material or they're not concrete, which would be contrary to his position tonight. So if abstractions do exist, they must also be concrete, which is definitionally a contradiction. We have, at least to my knowledge, we have two ontological categories, material and abstract, conceptual and real, as they would say. So if knowledge, if it's concrete, is a material in the brain or a collection of material in the brain would also be identical to the person acquiring the knowledge. We say, hey, can we acquire knowledge? In this case, justified true belief. But if the person acquiring knowledge is identical to the knowledge itself, being that if a person acquires knowledge and knowledge is literally the brain, then the person acquiring knowledge is acquiring their brain, which would be reduced to the brain is acquiring the brain, if you were to say it properly. So it's a distinction with no difference. So what in fact is being required? It sounds like, to be consistent with a physicalist position, you'd say the brain is producing phenomena, and you're calling the phenomenon a true justified belief as opposed to a false belief. But the problem is that activity is all just one thing. It is the brain. So there's no way to talk about knowledge without referencing it as a category. But if categories exist, they must be concrete. If a category is concrete, then it's a particular concrete thing, not a category. How we understand categories is a collection of particulars that we conceptualize in a big folder called that's the category. I would say knowledge is itself a category, being that there are types of knowledge, even in philosophy, there are types of knowledge. Those types of knowledge would be in the folder category called knowledge. But that obviously is a problem under the physicalist view. So if a category is a concrete particular, then knowledge is a particular thing in a particular brain. So that is to say, every person who has a brain that has justified true belief has their own knowledge. It's a peculiar, particular knowledge. It's the only one of its kind. So it has no relation to other knowledge. It doesn't have a relation to other beliefs. There's no connection. There's no correlation between the two. They're totally in their own sort of vacuum. It's not full solipsism, I don't think, but it's kind of, it might entail it. It might entail it. There are as many referent of knowledge as there are brains from that view. How could a physicalist say any particular concrete item or material event is more true than another? They can't, because the methodology they suggest using to arbitrate between true and false is also a new cascade of material events in particular brains. So there are two simple syllogisms I'll use tonight which demonstrate that, one, knowledge has no ontology under physicalism. That is to say, you can't point to where or how it exists if it is in fact material. 2, acquiring knowledge itself requires a physicalist to special plead for certain types of concrete matter doing certain concrete things. So the first syllogism is premise 1. Categories don't exist under physicalism. Only particular instances of matter exist. So if premise 1 is categories don't exist under physicalism, that's a conceptual thing, not a material thing. Premise 2, knowledge is a category. Conclusion, knowledge does not exist under physicalism. Now, you couldn't really argue that physicalism can make knowledge possible if it doesn't even have an ontological status for it to exist in the first place. How would you know if knowledge is possible if it necessarily can't fit in the right folder called physical? You can't point to a physical thing called knowledge. The next syllogism is just as simple. Premise 1, concrete objects, events, or we could call them states of affairs, are not truth-apt. That is to say, when you look out in the world, things, items in the world, a rock, blade of grass, are not true or false. They just exist in the world. So now if we revisit my opponent's position, he's holding to the view that anything that exists is concrete in nature. Knowledge exists, therefore it must be concrete. I'd like to know tonight, what is it made of? How do you know you're looking at it when you're just looking at the concrete world around you as particulars? So I'd love to figure this out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And then... you reset that. And then Leophilius. Oh, you're right? Cool. Let me know when you're ready, and you'll have 8 minutes.
You
got 8 minutes.
So the question before us tonight is, does physicalism make knowledge impossible? Now, it's not a major point in the debate, I don't think, but I'm just going to take impossible here to just sort of mean either logically or metaphysically impossible. One of those two is going to be the most broad. And that's just to say that there is no possible world in which it can obtain. So any possible way the world could be, something is impossible if it cannot obtain in any of those ways the world could possibly be. I think we also need to define some terms. So by physicalism, I just mean the idea that everything that exists is physical. And by physical, I just mean concrete. And things that are concrete are things that stand in causal relations, as opposed to things that are abstract, which are things that do not stand in causal relations. Like numbers, for example, would be considered abstractum or abstracta in the plural, whereas electrons would be considered concreta. And this is because numbers don't cause things to happen, but electrons do. If they didn't, you wouldn't have electricity in your house. By knowledge, I just mean justified true belief, at least broadly. More specifically, I would say JTB plus, that is justified true belief, plus a reliable belief forming process that includes no false lemmas, just to take it a step further. But I can work with just justified true belief. I think that's a fine way to define knowledge for the sake of this debate. And does physicalism make knowledge impossible? Well, I would say no, because I don't see any contradiction. And all it means to say that something is possible, at least broadly, logically possible, is just to say that there are no contradictions in it. And I can't see any contradictions with the conjunction of both physicalism and humans having knowledge. So with that being said, no, I don't think it's impossible. At least it's not strictly logically impossible. Physicalism being true and humans having knowledge doesn't violate any of the laws or theorems of any sort of logic that I know of. And I would also say it's broadly logically possible. I can conceive of a world where we have knowledge like this world that we're in, the actual world, and a world, the same world, where physicalism is true, which again, I would say is the actual world. So I would say it's broadly logically possible. It's strictly logically possible. And I would also point to the fact that, at least with respect to the 2020 Phil survey, most respondents, particularly if you single out specifically epistemologists, are physicalists, and also think that there is some analysis we can do on knowledge. We should run a survey. I also do think it's worth pointing out, however, that it's only a slim majority of epistemologists that think we can actually do an analysis on knowledge. There is a quite a large minority of epistemologists and philosophers more broadly, if you go look at the survey, that think there is no analysis of knowledge at all. So just to sort of point out that this what knowledge is and whether we can analyze it is still something that epistemologists and philosophers more broadly are debating.
I
But
would change
I don't
his
see any
forehead shot,
contradictions
but it's
with
going to change in a
physicalism being
second.
true and humans having knowledge, and so I'm not motivated to think that they are impossible, and I can just leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introductions. Hang on for 1 second. Sorry about that. And yeah, so we'll be starting the 60-minute open panel, open discussion, and it'll have up to an additional 60 minutes depending on audience engagement. You can super chat a question to panelists, and it will be read to them for $5. You can do this with comments as well, but comments are going to be held till the end of the open discussion portion. I also retain the right to not read comments if they appear to violate YouTube TOS. I will jump into the conversation and read the question for you. Just try to keep them on topic somewhat, right? $2 super chats will be displayed on screen as well. Our panelists tonight are immune to mutes and kicks, so keep that in mind. You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mega bloodbath engaged.
Do you record
you have
that?
60 minutes.
Do you pre-record that, or do you do that every?
And since I spoke last, if you've got any questions, go ahead.
Breakfast Tacos, do you do that live every time, the mega bloodbath, or do you record it?
Yeah. I should have it recorded.
You should get an echo in there.
Was that bad?
Yeah.
No, it was good. No, I thought it was about 6, 7.
Oh,
Leo.
also, I forgot to mention, I have 50 pieces of clothing on. I'll be removing them as we get likes.
Disgusting.
Let's slam that like button, and we'll get 50 likes, and I'll be naked. Let's go, people. Yeah. All right, let's go. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question, because you did refer to abstracta, right? That most people would call abstracta. From a physicalist view, do you think that exists, or that's just like an illusory linguistic term we use to refer to things that aren't concrete, but they don't actually exist?
Yeah, I'm a nominalist, so I would say abstracta do not exist.
Okay, and then would you say categories are abstractions, categories themselves as anomalies? Okay. Mm-hmm. Would you argue that knowledge itself is a category?
I think knowledge can be understood as a category. I don't know if that's what it is necessarily, but
okay. But
I think a category of beliefs that are justified and true, or something like that.
Okay, so if categories don't actually exist under physicalism, and knowledge, you said, could be a category, but could it be anything? Could knowledge be anything other than a category? Conceptually, a category.
Probably. I'm not sure. I think it really just comes down to the particular approach that one takes in their analysis of knowledge.
Okay, because my I have a syllogism. It would be cool if you engage with it, maybe. So P1 is categories don't exist under this form of physicalism you're defending, right? They don't exist. They don't have an ontology, right? Premise 2, knowledge is a category. Conclusion, knowledge does not exist under physicalism.
Well, under my view, I would say knowledge does not exist. I don't think knowledge is a thing in the world.
Okay, so if knowledge doesn't exist, how could you know knowledge is possible under physicalism?
Because it's a concept that we can talk about. Just like I don't think Santa Claus exists, but I think we could talk about whether it's possible that if Santa Claus could exist, which I think logically, it's possible.
Well, Santa Claus would be a material claim, right?
I mean, if he existed, he would be a material object, yes.
Right, but if knowledge is just because we have a concept of Santa Claus, but the referent itself would be a physical fat man who climbs down creepily and delivers items to children without our consent. So that's why I asked if the status of knowledge under physicalism is non-existent, that it just doesn't exist. I'm not sure when you say no, knowledge is possible under physicalism. When we say possible, are we saying it's possible to exist under physicalism?
When I say that knowledge is possible under physicalism, I'm just saying it is possible for an agent to possess knowledge even if physicalism is true.
Okay,
there is no contradiction in physicalism being true in some agent in that physicalist reality having knowledge.
I guess the contradiction I would find, and I'd be interested to see if you could give an alternative, is P, knowledge is concrete, not P, knowledge is not concrete. So I'm not sure under physicalism, what is it you're referring to in the world that's physical when you say knowledge is possible? If I said some invented abstraction was possible, you said, well, it could be logically possible, metaphysically possible. But under physicalism, we're talking about it has to be physically possible for it to be in existence for physicalism, right? Like, could something exist under physicalism but not hold to what's necessary for you to refer to something as existing? Like can something exist in physicalism that's not physical?
I would say no, because then there would be a non-physical existing thing, which would just seem to entail the falsity of physicalism.
Right. So if knowledge doesn't, if you admit that knowledge doesn't exist under physicalism, what is it that's possible when you say knowledge is possible under physicalism? What is possible?
Knowledge, so like the concept of knowledge. I think that we can talk about the possibility and impossibility of concepts. I don't think that there has to be some sort of concrete object that's being referred to. Like in mathematics, there might be certain operations we say are impossible, or certain evaluations, mathematical evaluations that are impossible. But I at least me, you might have a different view with respect to mathematics, but I'm an anti-realist about mathematics, so I don't think that like math is a thing in the world. It's just this conceptual schema that humans develop. So we can talk about the possibility and impossibility of certain things in mathematics, despite that not referring to anything in the world, so to speak. So I think the concept of possibility and impossibility can apply to concrete things in the world, but I also think it can apply to concepts.
Okay, but under your view, if I swapped categories or knowledge with concepts, under your physicalist nominalist view, you'd also say that concepts don't exist, right?
Yeah, concepts are not things in the world.
Okay, so when I asked, in what way is knowledge possible under physicalism? And you say it's possible in the way that concept of knowledge is possible. But then if I asked, how are concepts possible under physicalism? They don't exist. And so now you'd have to answer that. How are concepts possible under physicalism? What are you referring to when you say a concept's possible under physicalism?
Well, I would say a concept is largely going to be some sort of like mental map that an agent forms, and that's probably going to be rooted in the structure of the variety of parts of the brain that are involved in that. I know like the prefrontal cortex is a huge one in like belief formation, and I think maybe goal directedness as well. That might be a different part of the brain, but all of those features that play into us having beliefs, us saying that we know things, those are just patterns across the brain. So I would say that things like knowledge are just going to consist in that. Okay,
so concepts, you say, could be possible under physicalism, but they would be identical to sort of mapped out brain patterns and physicality in the brain.
I mean, I don't know if I would say identical to. The terminology I would use would be emergent from, and for emergence I just take in this context to be that there is some sort of like higher order pattern or structure that results from a variety of lower order parts put together in a particular way that is not itself possessed by any of the individual lower order parts. Think of a puzzle. You get a puzzle of a red barn. The red barn is a picture that requires all of the puzzle pieces to be in a particular order. But if you took one of the individual puzzle pieces, there isn't a picture of a red barn on it.
Sure.
So that picture emerges from the structure of the puzzle pieces. That's sort of the idea that I'm...
Okay, so you're saying that concepts themselves wouldn't be identical to matter, but the thing you're referring to when you say concept, the referent is matter.
I mean processes, processes and structures occurring in material, in a material object, namely.
Okay, because you would agree that if you said concept was concrete, that would be a contradiction, right?
Well, I wouldn't. Excuse me. I wouldn't make that claim. I think concepts are abstract.
I know, but to say abstract things are concrete would be a contradiction.
Oh yeah, that would just be that would be like saying married bachelor. So,
right, yeah. So like it would just be false. So that would be if a physicalist tried to say concepts are matter themselves, they are matter, you would push back on that.
Oh yeah, I would say I don't know. I would just be like that. I just don't really understand how that would work.
Right. Okay, so, and you also said that, do you believe that, because if I said knowledge doesn't actually exist in a positive ontological way physically under physicalism, but if justified true beliefs then don't exist, because that's what we're defining as knowledge, you're saying that under this view, justified true beliefs don't actually exist.
Yeah, they're not things in the world. They're just emergent brain functions, emergent from brain functions. And then we have languages.
Point of moderation on your screen, Jim Bob. Leo is only showing his forehead, and then like half the mega.
Is that change? Is that change sometimes? No, it's my deal.
I think it's
Leo.
because I was on there.
Jim Bob debates Leo's forehead.
I promise it's not visual rhetoric. I promise. Okay, cool. Thanks for that note. I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess I would go into then that if justified true belief, the concept you're saying doesn't exist, would you also say that when you say justified true belief, that's a reference, but the referent you're pointing to, describing, did he just got booted?
He probably hit the wrong button.
That's fine. I'll just wait.
I don't think that was a rage quit.
No, definitely not. He was
this is a question for you, I guess, while we wait for him. Austin Sims, I think you know him, was asking, what do you do if evidence from God's world contradicts your faith in God's world? Do you reject / reinterpret the evidence from God's world or faith?
Let's save that for after.
Okay. Sorry about that. My cat decided to step on my keyboard, and some things happened. So.
Okay, no problem.
This is a quick one. Do the Jedi exist as a category internally?
The Jedi? Yeah, maybe the idea of a Jedi.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm not on the Jedi side. I think they're all about disorder and rebellion, and they're kind of hippies. They party with furries and stuff. So anyway, what I was asking, Leo, is when you say justified true belief, that's a concept. You're saying the concept of justified true belief doesn't exist, but are you saying the referent for it is patterns in the brain too? Like it's like a set of like chemical neurons and things that you could isolate inside the brain, and you go, that's the justified true belief right there.
I think in some sense, yeah, we could say here's some activity that occurs in the brain, and we notice that this activity increases substantially when people are engaged in higher order thinking, belief forming, things like that. So we associate the activity in these parts of the brain with the belief forming and the recurrence of beliefs. God, of course I'm going to blank on the word. But there's a word for a thing that's related to like beliefs and all that stuff that there's a part of, I think it's the prefrontal cortex that lights up. And I think one could say, all this activity is a person's, say, knowledge. Like if somebody's reading something and it asks them to think about the fact that the sun emits electromagnetic radiation, we see all these parts of the brain light up. That is that person's, that is representative of the person's JTB, that the sun emits electromagnetic radiation. The knowledge that that's what the sun does.
And that you would consider that's a justified true belief happening in the brain.
I would say it's a process happening in the brain. I wouldn't say the process itself is a justified true belief.
Oh, okay. So under physicalism, what is it you'd point to in the physical to say that's the justified true belief?
I think the brain functions.
The brain functions. Well, brain functions exist, but there are brain functions that you would argue are false beliefs too, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so then where would you, like if I asked you where is a justified true belief in the brain, would you just say it doesn't exist as the brain?
I don't think it exists as like a thing in the brain or at a part of the brain. I think it's just a resultant feature of a variety of processes, structures, and relations. I don't know if we could ever isolate it and say this particular pathway, just regardless of its size or how much of the brain it ranges over, that this particular pathway is some justified true belief. I think at best we could say that beliefs, justified or otherwise, true or otherwise, are formed and held and recalled through a variety of processes that occur in the brain. And that when we communicate and talk with each other, we call these things, the things that we believe or the things that we know.
Right. And then when we talk, that's also sort of like a downstream from the same, maybe not identical, but same in the sense that the brain is sort of cascading mechanically and causing us to make propositions that we also believe are true. Like when we make an utterance, do you believe that's deterministically caused biologically, neurologically from a physicalist view? Like, is there any intention? I'm asking. Is there any intention in physicalism that you're defending?
Oh yeah, so I'm a compatibilist with respect to ideas of like intention and free will. I think that there are antecedent determinative factors to the decisions that we make, but I would also say that decision making is something determinative. We make decisions based on those antecedent factors, and our beliefs, our aims, our goals, our desires, our experiences, all of these things are those antecedent causal factors that are utilized to make the decisions that we make.
Okay, so like if I do an evaluation under physicalism, your view is that evaluations and propositions, now, do they exist under your view positively, or are they in the same category as non-existent knowledge and that stuff?
Yeah, I would put them in that same category.
That they're non-existent
things in the world. Yeah, they're not things
okay.
in the world.
Okay, evaluation from your view doesn't actually exist.
No, it's just like a thing that agents do.
Oh, it's like an event. Well, doing would be in the world, wouldn't it? Like if a brain did something, that would be an event in the world.
We do things based on our evaluations, but the evaluation like isn't something out in the world.
Okay, so far your view is knowledge itself, justified true belief, doesn't exist. Categories don't exist. Abstractions don't exist. Concepts don't exist. Evaluations don't exist. Do propositions exist?
No, not as things in the world.
Okay. Propositions don't exist in the world. So it sounds like there's a non-existent category that you appeal to in operating in the world. So like when you navigate the world as a person, you actually assume things that don't exist in order to determine whether your beliefs are accurate.
I mean, yeah, I utilize a variety of different concepts when I think about the world and a variety of schemas. I mean, logic, mathematics, all that stuff. And yeah, none of those things exist. Those things aren't real. They're concepts in our head. If humans didn't exist, none of these things would exist.
Okay, so then when you say you're appealing to non-existent things to come to the truth of the matter about the existing things, what is the connection between non-existent things that would lend you the confidence to talk about existing things if your schema is actually non-existent?
Well, there isn't really there couldn't be a connection with something that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for you to connect to it.
Right. So the mode and activity that you use to come to knowledge about the physical world, you use wholly, admittedly, non-existent things.
Yeah. I think everyone does. I'm a nominalist.
But how do you use a non-existent thing?
By thinking about them, at least in this instance.
Yeah, but how could you think about something that doesn't exist?
It's the same way we think about Santa Claus. Or if I said like flying unicorns or something.
No, but
these things don't exist. We can think about them.
Well, Santa Claus is something, the reason we say Santa Claus doesn't exist is because the thing we're referring to, the referent, we're saying the referent doesn't exist. You're saying the actual category doesn't exist. Like you're actually saying the entirety of categories don't exist. So Santa Claus as a actual person, we say doesn't exist, but the concept of Santa Claus, most people would say the concept of Santa Claus does exist, but you're saying the concept of Santa Claus doesn't even exist.
Yeah, I don't think concepts are like things in the world.
Okay, but when you say you don't believe concepts are things in the world, when you say the concept of Santa doesn't exist, what are you referring to when you say the concept of Santa then?
It's usually I'm referring to Santa Claus, which would be like, so, I mean, really, all define Santa Claus in terms of the intentions, ITENSION, not TION. The meanings of terms or the things in virtue of which the term means something. So you might think of a fat man, big white beard, wears a red suit, delivers presents to kids on Christmas, flies around in a sleigh, like those kind. That's what I'm referring to when I refer to Santa Claus.
Sure, yeah,
those
the
are
actuality.
The intentions of the term.
Yeah, but then you use the word meaning, so I'd be interested in knowing, do you believe meaning exists, being that it's conceptual?
Not as a thing in the world, no.
Okay, but when you say not as a thing in the world, if it's not in the world, it actually doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So you're saying meaning itself doesn't exist at all?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so if under pure physicalism, if abstractions, concepts, and meaning don't exist in the world, can you tell me how it's possible for us to talk right now?
Oh, we have languages that we use.
Languages doesn't exist. Language doesn't exist. That's conceptual.
Language, I mean, it exists in a sense that there are physical symbols and sounds.
Well, a physical symbol doesn't tell you the meaning of the symbol. So I would agree that you could write down something on paper, but the problem with that is you could write two symbols that mean completely different things to different cultures. And so if you say language, I use language, you'd have to concede is a category conceptually that doesn't actually exist in the world. You can't point to a thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, even if I granted that, so what? Like, that doesn't stop us from having, like, this debate will continue, even if I said, yeah, you're right. So clearly, it doesn't really matter if these things were not, like, real things out in the world, which I think with language, there's a little bit more nuance there. Again, because there are physical symbols and sounds that make up languages.
Okay, but
the meanings behind all of our words and language structures and all that doesn't exist. You can't point to... When I point to an object, I'm not pointing like this. This is a beer can, Miller High Life.
That's not beer.
We've got the beer, Miller. I'm sorry.
That's cold.
But when I point to this
piss.
can, I'm not pointing to the meaning of the can. Like
I understand. I understand.
So yeah, meaning isn't a thing out there.
But then language is not a thing. But you said it doesn't really matter. But that itself doesn't really matter. The phrase that also doesn't exist in the world.
Sure.
So when you say it doesn't really matter, is that true, being that you admit that phrase actually doesn't exist?
It's true for me because I think it doesn't matter, but somebody else might think it does matter. Maybe you think it matters.
Well, no. I'm saying if we were both physicalists, when you say it doesn't really matter, that thing you just referred to as a statement, that actually doesn't exist. So am I supposed to believe you when you say something doesn't matter, being that your standard for things that exist and don't exist? Even meaning and language and math, those don't exist. So why should I accept a truth claim from you?
Because you can understand the things that I'm saying and verify whether they're true. I mean, like, if I told you that I am having a debate with you right now, are you going to say, well, I don't know if that's true? I'm probably not. You're probably going to be like, well, of course I am.
Well, that can't be true under review. A debate itself doesn't exist as matter in the world, but debates don't exist.
Yeah, you're right. Debates don't exist. Debates
this doesn't exist. So
that emerges out of the activity of humans.
So we're not debating.
Well, I mean, of course we're debating.
Wait, no, you can't say debates exist, but we're not debating, or debates don't exist, but we are debating. What are we doing? What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the discussion that we're having, utilizing a common language that was agreed upon by all participating parties. The thing that when we say the word debate, talk about a debate, that's what we mean.
Right, but like the debate itself, under your physicalist view you're defending tonight, debates don't exist.
Sure.
They don't exist.
Yeah,
so the winner of a debate also doesn't exist. Losers and winners of debates also don't exist.
No, that's all evaluative. Evaluations aren't things in the world. Well, they're things agents do.
I understand, but agent itself, you can't find a physical thing called an agent.
Yeah, I can.
No, that's a concept.
I see two of them on my screen.
No, that's a concept. What you see are two physical, concrete things, and even that is a concept referring to the reference. So an agent is a conceptual term for an object, right?
Yeah, and that object is the agent.
Well, no, you can't say that.
The concept just refers to the object, just like an electron is just a word. Like we have a concept of an electron. The concept refers to something in the world. So there are concepts that don't refer to things in the world.
Okay. So it sounds like if it's the case that meaning doesn't exist and all of the tools that you utilize to come to justified true belief, which also doesn't exist, knowledge doesn't exist, your view is that all these operations, even debating about whether or not knowledge is possible, the debate of whether or not knowledge is possible also doesn't exist.
I mean, sure.
Okay, so if the debate about whether knowledge is possible doesn't exist, how would you know knowledge is possible from a debate?
Because I can look and see whether or not there are contradictions in the terms.
Contradictions don't exist. Those are conceptual.
Sure. But I can still use concepts.
No. Using concepts, you're using something that you're denying the existence of. How could you, if I used a hammer...
Something not existing doesn't mean it can't have meaning.
No,
Or can't be
meaning.
meaningful.
You admitted meaning doesn't exist.
Sure, but that's neither here nor there.
No, you said
Meaning isn't a thing out in the world. You can't
just said-
point to a meaning in the world.
You
You're
just
right.
said-
It doesn't exist. It's still a useful concept.
usefulness
use it
doesn't
all the time.
exist. Usefulness doesn't exist.
Yeah, sure. Usefulness is some sort of normative evaluation, and those things are emergent from the processes of agents. So they're not things in themselves out in the world. You're right. They don't exist.
But
that doesn't mean we don't use them.
Processes don't exist.
Process, yeah, they do.
No, a process is a conceptual category for just some sort of state of affairs in the world. They don't exist.
Yeah, that's what most words are.
Well, words don't exist from your view.
Sure.
Okay. So what does exist under physicalism if everything you're utilizing to describe what exists don't exist?
The physical world?
No, that's also a metaphysical claim, the physical world. That's conceptual.
Well, I don't know what you mean by that's a metaphysical claim.
Well, reality out there. Would you agree, Leophilius, if I said reality, like out there, the word reality is a concept for some notion of the state of affairs that I'm viewing outside, right? It's not identical to it. It's a concept for it.
I mean, I'm not sure if I would agree that it's not identical to it, but I mean, I would say reality is the external world.
What I'm pointing to is if what you find real is the result of a process that you deny exists, I don't think you have access to what you think is from this view anyway. I know in your experience you do. I'm saying that if you come to a justified true belief about the world, but the methodology you use, everything you use to come to notions about the external world, everything you're using is totally illusory and non-existent, I'm not sure how you have access to what you thought was the physical external world, being that the bridge between it
my
has to be
perceptual apparatuses.
Yeah, but that would be conceptual.
See it and touch it and hear it.
Well, would you agree that it's not just touching it; it's evaluating the sense data too? It's not just touching.
I think agents do evaluate their sense data. That's part of how, like, our decision making and our goal directedness and all of that. You know, we might see a child drowning, and that might motivate us to act in some way, given some evaluation of how that event that we're seeing makes us feel. But
so do you think it's an objectively true statement about the world that agents do things?
Yeah.
Okay. How can it be true that an agent does something in the world if agents, according to your own view, don't exist?
Well, I think agents do exist.
No, I didn't ask if you think they exist. I'm saying that agent itself is not something that's found as matter in the world. Your term of agency, no, matter exists. Your idea of a matter in the world, like we're globular matters, like, right? We're just like sort of like physical masses. You calling us an agent, right, is a concept. Like the word agent is a concept.
Well, every word's a concept.
Yes, I know.
But what it refers to that might not be. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Right.
When I say agent, I'm referring to real things in the world.
Right. You're saying real things in the world do things.
Yeah.
And you know that because you evaluated them ongoing in time, like inductively, right?
Yeah, I see the world and I see things happening.
Okay. To see the world, do you have to use your evaluation?
I mean, not necessarily immediately, no.
But ultimately, to make a conclusion, like to say like agents do things, do you agree that to come to the conclusion agents do things, in this case, that's the justified true belief example. To come to the conclusion that agents do things, is it true that you have to appeal to your evaluation of what you call the world to come to that conclusion?
I think so, yeah.
But your evaluations don't exist in the world, right?
Well, the content of my evaluations doesn't. No, there's no like thing that's there that is the evaluation that's an object in the world.
Okay. Because it sounds like if a justified true belief is the product of an evaluative process, but processes and evaluations actually don't have any positive ontology, I'm not sure what you're saying.
I think processes do.
Do you think a process is a conceptual thing or an actual thing?
Well, I think we have concepts of processes, and at least most of the time, those concepts refer to things in the world.
But aren't you using the assumption of the regularity of nature to say there's a process?
Sure.
But isn't that referencing a past, a conception of the past?
Yeah.
But the conception of the past doesn't exist from your model.
I think it does. I think the past exists. I also think the future exists.
Wait a second.
I hold to a B theory of time.
Okay, we'll get
Past,
into that in a
present,
second.
and future aren't like objectively real things.
I know you.
Past, present, and future don't exist. Space-time and its contents do, and we, based on our position in space-time and our light cones, can define things as being in our present, in our past, or in our future, but those are just things we made up based on our experience of the world. Past, present, and future are not objectively real features of the world, nor is there a passage of time. Time doesn't flow or move or anything like that, on my view.
Okay, so you're saying the past, your conception of the past, you utilize to do induction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that's what induction is based on, yes.
Yeah, so
At least largely.
Yeah, I agree. So if you have a recollection of the past, but conceptual recollections under your view are not real, what are you referring to, appealing to then come to conclusions inductively if they don't exist?
The thought processes that I have.
Yeah,
my ability to do induction. I can't remember what parts of the brain are involved in induction, but we've actually been able to figure out where in the brain humans do like inductive thinking, and my camera wants to go out of focus, and deductive thinking, and that they're similar. But if I remember correctly, the article said that there are some differences in what's going on in the brain between inductive thinking and deductive thinking, which I thought was interesting. But that's what I think we use. I think we use our thought processes,
right? But
which are the result of processual structures in our brains.
But
now the processual structures in our brains exist, but concepts are things that just sort of
are thoughts concepts?
No, concepts are thoughts, but thoughts are not concepts.
Okay, what ontology do thoughts have under your physicalist view?
They are processual features of the structure of the brain. They're the processes, or a part of the processes that the brain carries out as it metabolizes.
Okay, so then is knowledge like a justified true belief? Is that a thought? Would you put it in that category?
I mean, yeah, I think you could say that like our knowledge, our beliefs, that those are thoughts. I mean, yeah, I don't know if that's very technical, but you could say that.
Well, the reason I ask is if there's a thought in the brain and you call that a true thought, and there was a false thought in the brain, if they're just material, I'm not sure how you delineate between the two, whether one's true or false from a physicalist view. What would be the method?
The thought in and of itself wouldn't be true or false. Truth and falsity would be concepts that we develop to describe the various thoughts that we have about things.
But concepts don't exist.
Sure, they're not things in the world.
So you use non-existent things to come to the truth of thoughts.
I mean, sure, I don't see what turns on that. I use non-existent things to understand how the physical world works because I use math to understand how the physical world works. The fact that math, on my view at least, is not a thing out in the world, and therefore it doesn't really exist in any real sense of that term, doesn't mean that it isn't a concept, and doesn't mean that I still can't use it. Mathematics is a result. It's a highly, highly emergent thing that results from the structure of human brains and a variety of structures across human society.
And would you say
physicalist things like languages and what have you?
Okay, and would you say the physicalist view is, from your view, one of the better ways to come to the truth about our material world?
I think physicalism as a framework, I'm not sure if like physical. So more broadly, what I would say is naturalism, but I think you can understand the similarity.
Similar, sure.
I don't know if I would say that like it informs. I mean, of course, there's some basic sense in which it informs the way you look at the world. But at least for me, and I think a lot of other people that I know that are naturalists, it's not like we started with naturalism and used that as a way of understanding the world and how it works. It's that we did our best to understand the world and how it works and our place within it and all of that fancy stuff, and concluded that naturalism is a meaningful framework for helping to define and refine our understanding of the world around us. It's a good broader framework for positioning ourselves with respect to what it is that we know and what it is that we understand and what it is likely is real and really exists.
Yeah, so you believe that you can revise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
broadly, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so revision, would you agree revision, I know you're a compatibilist, but would you agree revision requires some sort of intent?
Oh, of course.
Okay. And so I'm actually interested in how you make compatibilism work under this view, because like if there's a large amount, I would call it constraints, like let's say our brains operation could be constrained and we're stuck in the material world, and there are constraints on us physically. But deterministically, you don't hold that all of your beliefs are actually just a determined result of physicality.
I'm sorry, repeat just that last part one more time.
Do you believe that all of your beliefs, your held beliefs, whether they're false or true, do you believe that they're determined by physicality? Like they're actually a product, like a byproduct, like they're like epiphenomenal from the machine brain, like they just kind of percolate out, like you don't have any ultimate will in the matter to go like, I'm going to think about this? Because under the physicalist view, wouldn't it be the case that you're already thinking about it? Whatever you thought you were about to go, I'm going to think about this right now, that you're already doing, like you're determined to do that already?
I mean, I think there's some sense in which you're determined to do it, in the sense that all of the determinative and evaluative factors that we engage in are going to be consistent with the laws of physics. So there's this sort of broad determinism, which really just means consistency with the laws of nature and all of that stuff, that I think is true. I don't think that doesn't mean that there could potentially be some level of stochasticity still involved with decision making and the evaluative processes that humans go through. I'm not sure if I'm fully convinced that there is, but I know it's been suggested. I define things like decision making, our intent to do things, being about things, directedness, as I call it, the directedness of thought you might hear. I think that is just the result of physical processes across the brain.
Okay.
And it's nothing more. And I think that while we have an imperfect picture, we still have a relatively coherent picture of how it is that the brain can produce things like that, not just in humans, but in other animals as well.
Okay. Do you think that in order to think about the natural world, you have to hold a view that the natural world is composed of particulars that have and maintain the law of identity?
I mean, I think the law of identity is just an axiom of redundancy in a broader schema that just says that an object is what it is, like that no object is not what it is, or is not what it's not, and it is what it is, which to me is just like some basic redundant axiom you're using in some schema that's utilized for understanding the world. I don't think that like the law of any laws of logic are like some sort of impositive force, like imposing on the world and making it or guiding it or governing it to behave some way. I think these are just like descriptive things humans come up with.
Well, right, but descriptions don't exist under your view. Those are conceptual.
Sure. But humans, I mean, under my view, humans still describe things. We still use a variety of conceptual schemas. These conceptual schemas are not things in the world, of course.
So why aren't they illusory, though? Why would you trust, if you held the view that when we describe the law of identity or math or theorems, or even write an essay for that matter that uses all this language and meaning, I'm not sure why, even from the justified true belief, I don't think under your own system, being that you did add the plus, but I don't know if the one I read in the opener was a plus or not. You could tell me. Is the plus the justified in believing that P, given that it's supported with good evidence, reasons, and reliable process?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. Well, the thing is, reliable process, the thing called reliability is not found in the world. So if you said, I believe X to be true, and I do believe it, and I used a process, a reliable process, even though the reliable process itself doesn't pass the test to be a justified true belief in a reliable process. So it's like the activity of being a physicalist is that you're actively believing and participating in a bunch of things you don't think exist, and you use terms like reliability even though you admit that reliability itself, to believe there's a thing called reliability, doesn't pass the criterion for being a justified true belief.
Well, why doesn't it?
Because reliability is a concept.
So?
Well, concepts don't exist. So if I said,
So?
well, I'll tell you, if I said a justified true belief is something, a belief I hold to that's true, that can be empirically demonstrated or supported with good evidence and reasons, if you, and the reasons are produced by a reliable process, but the reliable process itself is not, it doesn't actually pass the threshold for believing in it to begin with. So you're using something called a reliable process that it itself, believing in a reliable process, doesn't actually pass the test for justified true belief. That's a contradiction.
Are you saying that that's because it's involved in forming justified true beliefs?
No, because the status of it under your view in this case, because someone could hold a justified true belief system and have a different approach to things like reliability, regularity, nature, concepts, math, right? But we're talking about physicalism. Specifically, physicalism, reliability as a concept, a reliable process, that term, is a concept that you have to deny the actual existence of. But it's literally the thing that you believe in to get to justified true beliefs.
Yes.
So you don't have a justified true belief. You don't. Your process to your process to come to justified true belief is a process that doesn't pass the test to be a justified true belief.
I don't see how.
What do you mean? Reliable process is a concept that doesn't exist. So you're using a concept that doesn't exist, and your assumption on what's reliable insofar as a justified true belief relies on something that doesn't exist, that doesn't even pass the test for existence. You have a false belief, in other words. Let me put it simply. Reliable process is not a justified true belief under physicalism. You use an unjustified true belief to produce justified true beliefs.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of how like classical foundationalism and epistemology, that there's just a set of foundational beliefs, and we're justified in having them. But there isn't going to be any other beliefs in virtue of which they're justified, because they are that's it. That's the foundation, hence foundationalism. And
Okay.
I'd lean towards sort of a foundationalist view. I'm not going to say that I'm like a committed classical foundationalist.
Okay.
But yeah. So yeah, there are. The way that Alvin Plantinga talks about it is sort of like properly basic beliefs that I have that form the basis of my knowledge set. And I think I can do that. I think that's quite frankly, probably how most people do it, at least to some degree. Philosophers seem to agree on that as well as an approach, it seems.
So if someone says, I believe X, and you say, well, that's not a justified true belief because you didn't show supporting good evidence and reasons and a reliable process, and they say, darn it, I got to go back to the drawing board then. I'll come back, Leo, with that. And you say, thank you, that's good thinking, right? But when you look closer, that you have an inconsistency here, because if reliability, a reliable process itself, the thing that you're telling me in this case to go back to the drawing board and go get, right, to justify my belief, you're saying that the reliable process you're telling me to use, that process to believe in that is itself an unjustified belief. So it's almost like you're saying like, hey, let me see if your belief is justified. And I go, is it? And you go, no. Here, use this unjustified belief in reliable processes to go do the work and come back to me. And I go, wait a second. If the belief in a reliable process to produce justified true beliefs itself isn't a justified true belief, why would I use the reliable process that doesn't even pass the justified true belief test? Why would I do that?
Because it seems to be helpful in better understanding the world around us, is that we use reliable processes to help form the beliefs that we have about the world.
But the reliable process doesn't pass the criterion for a justified belief in it.
Sure, there's going to be lots of beliefs that we have that aren't going to be justified.
Okay.
The concept of justification just wouldn't apply to those particular beliefs. Primitive beliefs would probably be one example of that. beliefs that we have, but that there are no further underlying beliefs or propositions or what have you that which could be adduced as some sort of justification for those beliefs. It would just be primitive.
So a justified true...
I would say that like your belief that you exist, I think that's just a primitive belief.
Okay.
I don't know what it would mean to say that you're justified in. It's just an immediate feature of your perceptive experience about the world. Like,
okay, but but experience itself is a concept that doesn't exist.
Well, experience refers to some process happening in the world, usually through a variety of perceptive apparatuses.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying a justified true belief is a belief that passes the process of reliability insofar as good evidence reasons. But the process that produces justified beliefs isn't a justified true belief.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a justification for the fundamental axioms of like mathematics and logic either. So I still believe them. I still accept them.
So you admit that there is a slew of things you accept that don't pass the threshold for justified true belief?
That are unjustified, yeah.
Okay. And so
there are some things in which the concept of justification, it's not analyzed in terms of that.
Okay.
You appeal to the law of identity. That's an unjustifiable axiom. And it's not that like there needs to be a justification for it, and there should be one, but the concept of justification doesn't apply to something like that, because you would use that axiom to build the concept of justification that you're going to use when you approach the world. Okay, so it wouldn't make sense to take a concept built from a set of axioms and apply it back to those axioms individually. That's just there's also some people that said that doing this is probably going to be problematic. Kurt Gödel.
Is that a guy?
Yeah. Gödel's incompleteness
theorem. Gödel. Yeah. I was like, what? Yeah, Kurt Gödel, the two incompleteness theorems. Yeah. Like generally speaking, like obviously it's more complex than I can understand mathematically, but you're saying that ultimately every system becomes internally circular, needs to appeal out of the system, right? Yeah, outside.
Well,
of
that there are going to be true statements in any consistent formal system in which you can do some arithmetic.
Okay.
There are going to be statements in the system that are true, but that nevertheless can be formally proven true by that system.
The system. Yeah.
And usually that's making reference to the axioms that the system is based on, because the concept of proof in the system is going to be built out of those axioms. So to then take it and apply them back to the axioms individually is going to be problematic, because that concept was built out of those axioms. You need the set of those axioms to talk about the concept of proof. So the concept of proof doesn't apply back to any one of the individual axioms itself. You can't prove or justify the axioms that form the basis of your proof system.
So can I ask you, from your view, and this is less to do with, in a way it's not so relevant to the topic of whether physicalism can justify or produce knowledge or whatever, is that if it's the case that there are a whole slew of things you can't justify and a whole slew of things that you demand be justified under this system of justified true belief, do you personally hold a position of why which statements or beliefs you should be okay believing without justification, and which you demand justification, like which ones you demand? How do you determine which one you're like, okay, no, you're good, you can hold that belief, you can't justify it, that's fine, but all these other ones you should justify through this system of justified true belief? Like, which are the ones that you know what my question is? Like, which ones?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
How do you determine which beliefs ought to be justified and which ones ought not be, or aren't? I'm not sure if there's any solid line or way to define that, because it's not, I wouldn't say it's a huge debate, but there is still somewhat of a debate as to what justification specifically is in philosophy, and the same with knowledge, like I mentioned. And people can go fact check me. You can just go look at the 2020 Phil survey. A large minority of philosophers would just say that there is no analysis on knowledge. So there is still some debate on that. I don't know if there's like a hard line between these beliefs you can have and you don't need justification. I think it would probably come down to how one understands justification and how one applies justification in some
what about you
analytical
personally?
way to understand statements.
What about you personally? Because you're in a lot of debates and discords, and a lot of different beliefs come up, and I assume you sometimes run an empirical standard against someone who's making claims. But if they put it back on you, like personally, like you're saying that you don't think there's a developed absolute system that kind of delineates between the two, but where do you draw the line between a belief that you're like, yeah, you're good, don't worry about that, no justification, and then the ones you're like, no way, I need a justification for this?
It's probably going to be whether I would consider that particular proposition or what have you analyzable under my like theories of knowledge and theories of justification. Like if I can understand the proposition within that framework, then it would probably have some sort of justification or would need some sort of justification to be believed. But I also think there's a variety of personal features that everyone's going to use. If something, I mean, to speak really, really loosely, if something just kind of makes sense to me, which that can go down a whole fucking rabbit hole of the notion of intuitions, and I don't want to go down that road. Please don't take me down that road.
No problem.
But if I feel that some feature of my analysis or my experience motivates me to accept some proposition or to act in some way or what have you, then I would say in such an instance I am justified in what it is I am believing or doing. Okay.
And then would you say justification is itself conceptual and abstract?
Yeah, I think justification is some sort of abstract notion. It's a concept that we come up with for how the states of affairs of our understanding of the world relate to the world and to our societies.
And from that view, from the physicalist view you're defending tonight, you would concede that justifications themselves don't exist.
That's correct.
Okay, so when someone asks for a justified true belief, what you're asking for is something that admittedly the first part of doesn't exist.
Well, no, not as a concept. Concepts aren't real. Concepts aren't things in the world.
Right, so justifications don't actually exist.
Sure.
So if you ask someone to produce a justification, you're asking them to produce something that doesn't exist, right?
I mean, yeah, sure. It doesn't exist in the world. It's still a meaningful concept.
Meaningful concepts don't exist. So it's like you say a justification doesn't exist in the world. It's just another thing that doesn't exist in the world.
Yeah, these are all linguistic features of human communication and thought. They're not things out in the world.
So then to push back on someone who believes in something wild or whatever, and you say that's not a justified true belief, and you go, okay, well, how do I make it justified? You say you go back to the drawing board and do all these things, and you come back and you say, here, is this a justified true belief? And you go, well, I'm sorry, I kind of bait and switched you. Justifications don't actually exist.
Yeah, but justification is still a concept, and we can still use it.
Yeah, but concepts don't exist. I'm still trying to figure out from the physicalist view, if the term use, right, for anything that we use in the world, I use a camera, I use a toothbrush, sometimes I use this, I use that. These are things that make sense when you use the word use. So I'm trying to understand, I'm okay with a malleable use of the word use even, but I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say we use concepts if the thing you're referencing doesn't exist. I just don't understand how you can use something, even metaphysically and logically, in any way, shape, or form. How do you use something that doesn't exist?
We think about them.
You think about something that doesn't exist? How do you think about something
that's what these things are features of thought.
Right, but
the
thoughts
features
don't
of
exist.
Thought aren't thoughts exist. The features of thought are not things in the world. They're things in our thought.
Yeah, but you're saying you're
and we
using
can communicate them and find agreement and develop systems that we use for understanding the world and communicating that understanding.
Right. So
the fact that the features of this are not like I couldn't hold one in my hand or point to one. So doesn't mean that they're not things that we can use and that are useful tools for us. They're not things in the world. Sure. Okay.
So then how do I utilize, like, let's say an example, like I think of an object that just doesn't exist yet, but it's conceptual in my head. the concept I'm thinking of that doesn't exist. Let's say it's like some almost unintelligible tool, like you just don't recognize it. It's like hammery,
Like a
but not real.
plumbus?
Yeah, well, I don't even know what that is, but that. Yeah. So whatever that is, let's just imagine that we don't know what it is, we don't know how to use it. You're saying that thinking of it is identical to using it, even though it doesn't have a purpose or a
Well,
function?
when it comes to concepts, yeah, I think when we talk about using concepts, we're talking about these features of human thought that are expressed through a variety of means of communication. Concepts like justification, beliefs, knowledge,
Okay.
language, mathematics, yeah.
But then those are just more things that don't exist. So like communication is another interesting one. Do you believe communication exists positively or another category in the category of things that don't exist?
So I think that there are real features of communication. I'm engaging in it right
sound?
now by making physical sounds and all that.
Yeah.
But I think that absent any meaning, all you would hear is just noise. And that meaning is contained in the thought of humans.
So that, like you said before, you don't believe meaning actually exists. So you're saying sounds
It's not a thing
exist.
in the world.
It's not a thing. Well, it doesn't. It's not a thing anywhere. It just doesn't exist from the physicalist view. Not just in the world,
No.
just anywhere. It doesn't exist anywhere.
When I think of something not existing, I think of it not being like a thing out in the world. It's not a part of the world.
Well, it's not a part
By
of
world, I just
any
mean the
reality.
external physical reality. Well, I mean, there could be some possible world where maybe it exists in some way. I just am saying in the actual world, it's not like some feature of the like concepts are not things out in the world the way that a planet is out in the world or an electron is out in the world.
Okay.
That's what I mean when I say something doesn't exist. And
Do you
yeah,
think-
concepts don't exist.
When
I don't think that somehow means that they don't have meaning, that we can't give them meaning or utilize them in the variety of ways that we do.
Yeah, but meaning doesn't exist. So you say like,
Sure.
I don't think concepts exist, but I do believe they have meaning. All you're saying is like, if I were to swap out all the words you're saying, I don't think it actually exists, but it does not exist, not exist, not exist, not exist. Like you're just putting in things that don't exist. So I mean, let's move on to like knowledge itself, because do you believe a collection of people share a justified true belief about a thing?
Yeah, I think probably I would at least hope most people would say that they know that the sun emits electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah, and so when a group of people are agreeing on the state of affairs descriptively of out there in the world, like the sun does this or that, from a physicalist view, are you saying that the material itself in the brain as a structure, as a pattern, is identical to each other, being that sort of thought or proposition in a material way, if it's mapped onto the brain, do you think that they have to be identical, like the structures, if the proposition is the sun is hot or whatever, like it's hot out or whatever? Are you saying that justified true belief as a material thing, the thing you're actually referring to in the brain, are those all matched the same necessarily, or can they be incongruent physically and still have the same output? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I want to say that there is a term for that in multiple realizability. Is that what I'm thinking? Anyway, that's not. I need to go read stuff. I would say that there's probably. I wouldn't say that they need to be identical, and I wouldn't say that it needs to be necessary. But I would say that I would suspect that there are probably going to be a variety of similarities in terms of the regions of the brain that light up when if you brought a group of people in and had them think about the same piece of knowledge, you might say that they have, like that the sun emits electromagnetic radiation. I would suspect that very similar regions of the brain would light up to very similar degrees. There might be some minor incongruencies, which I think are probably going to be stochastic features of just the fact that the brain is a massive system that engages in an extreme number of interactions over extended periods of time.
Okay.
But yeah, I think generally similar for the most part.
And that would be true for a collection of people who also exhibit a false belief and a bunch of things light up too?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think for the most part.
Okay, and then what would you say would be the methodology inside the brain for determining, like if you were doing a blind test, like you didn't have access to the proposition, if physicality was the thing that was expressing true belief and false belief, wouldn't that mean that someone could look at a portion of the brain lighting up and they wouldn't need to know the proposition to know if it was true or false?
I don't think so. I don't think you could know whether somebody was thinking about something true or false just by looking at brain activity.
Okay. That's interesting because like from that view, like if brain activity produces true statements, hypothetically, you can kind of sort of engineer a brain that was producing false propositions and through the physicalism that you're holding to kind of manipulate the brain to always produce the true statement about what's at that. I'm not saying it's possible now. I'm saying like if it was pure materialism and physicalism, you'd be able to sort of instigate a true proposition out of people about things and false ones. Not only that, you'd hypothetically be able to take a group of people and code them to believe something that's entirely false and them think it's true, right? That they would think it was true.
Yeah, I think we've done that with people.
Where the
made people think that they had memories of things that never happened.
Right. So then if that's the case,
very vivid memories of things that never happened.
Right. So the people that's what's interesting about this view is that if that was true, and like I think that would be true if physicalism was true, like that that would be the reality of thinking under physicalism. That would be the reality. It would be like this causal chain of physical things happening that you could instigate and manipulate. But from that view, the person studying, the neurologist in this case, they would be subject to the same unknowables. Like, what if they were just determined to believe they were properly examining the brain and its relations? What if they just thought that?
There's some sense in which I think they are determined to do that.
They're just
All
determined.
Right, guys.
Okay.
That is the initial hour. We've got another 46 minutes, which I'll get queued up here in just a second. If either of y'all need to run to the restroom real quick, this would be a good time to run to the restroom.
I actually am going to do that.
I'm going to get a beer. A real beer.
What type?
Well, I have to eat my words now. It's an IPA, so I take that back.
I mean, that's a good beer. I hope y'all are all having a good time in the audience. Make sure to slam that like button. We're at 50, or we're over 50 likes now, so I am naked. So congratulations, everybody. You're all winners tonight. And with that being said, there was also a super chat comment. I normally hold these towards the end, but I really appreciate the super chat. The gifted memberships, Kurt. That's greatly appreciated. And then Kurt also said, Jim Bob, since you're back, language allows us to use concepts that have as if existence without those things having measurability to make speaking easier. Oh, did you not have your headset in?
No, I left to get a beer.
Gotcha.
You're not seeing the screen? Oh.
No, I am. I didn't realize you didn't have your headset in until just now, though. So language allows us to use concepts that have as if existence without those things having measurability to make speaking easier.
I don't know who's that. I don't know who that's to, but that's just describing what you think things allow for, like the use of something. The question tonight is, if concepts don't exist and language doesn't actually exist, you can't point to usability, because then you're saying I use things that don't exist. I use language, doesn't exist. Allows me to use concepts, doesn't exist, that have existence. They don't have existence according to physicalism. So when you say existence, there's nothing you're referring to, at least under physicalism, Alan. I don't know what side of this debate you're on, but I
think he was saying as if existence, like as if it existed for the purposes of conversation.
Yeah. So that means you're telling a as if story that we're talking about as if knowledge and truth. But if you were to be consistent from this view, the truthfulness of it is that it's illusory when we're playing sort of like a story game, that we're pretending that we're using things that don't exist, and we're pretending to measure things, and we're pretending to speak and communicate with each other, but there's no actual positive physical ontology from the physicalist view. It's just sort of like a play we're doing, you know. We're just kind of acting out something.
Gotcha.
It's illusory.
Right. And we're at 48 minutes right now, so I'm starting the back half. You can be a little bit more open with the discussion, too. So if it's tangentially related, feel free to dip into that a little bit if you need to. But I'm starting that now.
It's kind of like how Google doesn't exist. And I don't mean the company. I mean the website, the search engine.
That's
not a thing out in the world. It's the result of a variety of computational processes across I don't know how many servers.
Right. In that case, I would say what you're actually pointing to is an interface that utilizes a bunch of things that you don't think exist. So it's like you put up an interface. Even this right now, we're doing stream whatever, not StreamYard, but the other one, Restream. Like you're saying, Restream doesn't actually exist. It's just a representation of hardware. The hardware exists, you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And
so
the processes.
Wouldn't you say that software doesn't exist then?
Software
doesn't actually exist? From that view?
I don't know if I can make that statement. I'm not really sure about the technicalities of what software even is.
Yeah, I think it would end up following.
Software is just like the programming of something.
Yeah, programming would be fully conceptual. Like
program's probably going to be in like ones and zeros and logic gates and all that stuff, which I think are a part of the.
Yeah, but the software is not identical to the hardware. Under a physicalist view, you'd almost have to tell all your computer friends that the software that they slaved away writing doesn't exist.
I mean, it doesn't exist as a thing out in the world, but
why does it cost money then?
Because it's valuable to us.
Well, value doesn't exist.
Meaningful to us.
That doesn't exist either.
Sure. Great. And neither does the website Google or the website eBay. Those don't exist either.
Then neither does knowledge.
There's still sales done on them. No. I mean, if these things do exist, then where do they exist at?
Well, that's the thing, Leo. It's like, from my view, which isn't the topic, but just from even someone else's view, if you split existence into physicality and abstracta, you're not violating anything unless you're a physicalist to say, well, you know, I see the physical world, the thing that I call a physical world, and I utilize, anyone who did, philosophy of science knows you have to do philosophy of science to set up the kind of structure, mental structure to then do science. You're actually using terms that don't actually physically exist. So I think splitting reality into physical and abstract is perfectly fine.
I do that too. I split reality into physical and abstract. I just think that the abstract things are things that don't exist.
Right, but I think they exist, but not in the way an apple exists. And so you could still say they exist, but you have to craft another category for them. And that's why I think categories are really important. You go, well, physicality exists and abstracta exists. Abstract doesn't exist using the same standard as physicality. So I say an apple exists. There's a material thing that I could bite into that I call the apple, but I have to utilize something abstract to make sense of the non-abstract. And so I think they go hand in hand. You can't really separate the two, as I'm saying. You can't actually separate the two, because when I say there's a reality out there, I have already committed a statement to a statement that's not found in reality. That reality itself, the term, is a metaphysical term for this generality of particulars out there. And I think if you deny the conceptual, you don't really have a good reason, another thing that doesn't exist, to believe what you're engaging with if it's not bound together and unified. I see reality as unified between conceptual and material.
So are you like a Platonist or like a Neo-Platonist?
No, I would say like it would be closer to, well, I'm an Orthodox Christian, so the closer you'd get, at least in the philosophical sense, would be, I think that concepts that are universal, like knowledge and truth and meaning and information, that's another one we didn't talk about, we can talk about, that these concepts, because they're concepts, what we know about concepts is that they're oriented to a mind. Right. But the thing is, with talking to you, I'm not sure what a physicalist would say about the term mind. I think you would have to say the mind doesn't exist too, right?
Well, I think the mind exists.
Okay, so the mind would need to be physical then.
Yes, and it is.
Right, but now you have a problem because in my second syllogism here, concrete objects, events in the world, they're not truth apt. So like your mind is in the world, so it can't be your evaluations and things like that. Like the mind itself, if it was just the product of mechanics, you're going to have to split the mind from the brain. But don't you hold that the mind, if it exists, has to be material?
I don't know what it would mean to talk about a mind that was non-physical.
Okay, so I don't know what it would mean to say the mind itself is physical if you're not just saying the brain. So I'm wondering why you would make a distinction between the brain and the mind if what you're really pointing to is the brain.
Well, it's not just the brain; it's more what the brain does.
Is doing a process?
Yeah, probably a number of processes concurrently.
Okay, so the brain doing a thing, the doing of the brain is something distinct from the brain?
I think in some sense, yeah.
Okay, and is there something you think you can point to physically that is the mind of the brain and the rest isn't the mind of the brain? Like a section, like an island. That's the mind. This is not the mind. The brain.
No, I think the mind emerges from the functioning across the entirety of the brain. I think all of the parts of the brain are important to the sustenance of consciousness and of the mind and of the formation of the sort of the I, what we are, self-awareness, which is why I think all of those parts of the brain are parts of the brain, because all of them are requisite to maintaining that.
Okay.
And there is a super chat question from Kurt in regards to this. He's asking, did Isaac Newton read books about philosophy of science before he did his optics experiments?
No, I didn't say you need to do philosophy of science to make observations. I'm saying when you actually do experiments, you're assuming, whether he knows it or not, you're assuming a slew of categories for the world. That's what I'm saying. Getting higher resolution names for the categories is fine, but you're never not categorizing the world in a conceptual way when you're doing things.
Gotcha. And thank you, Kurt.
And there's actually, within the philosophy of science, and probably a bit more specifically the metaphysics of science, there is an ongoing debate about this, and how the phrase that I've read is how we sort of carve nature at its joints. Like how do we divvy up the natural world into the various categories of things? What philosophers of science would call natural kinds.
That would be universal.
It's quite an interesting subject, actually.
Right, but you deny that, right, from a nominalist? There's no natural kinds, actually.
Well, but that's the thing. Are natural kinds merely some sort of like abstract conceptualization, or do these things pick out something in the world? I myself am not. I'm sort of agnostic on that point.
Yeah. What about metaphysics? We didn't use that term necessarily, but we're kind of appealing to terms that would be. Do you think, under your physicalist view, metaphysics also doesn't exist?
I mean, not as a thing in the world. No, of course not. It's not.
Okay.
It's not out there. It's just another concept that humans have, feature of our thought processes, and something we share between ourselves with languages. And I think that intercommunicativity between humans is also a fundamental feature of all of the various conceptual schemas and analytic methods and processes that we use as a species for understanding the world: science, philosophy, logic, mathematics. It's not so much the thought of any one human as much as it is the shared thought and the history of that shared thought of humanity much, much more broadly. I think that's actually a very, very important feature to understanding how humans think and the systems that we use to conceptualize the things that we're thinking about and communicate them with each other.
But by feature, do you mean function? Like specific function?
Maybe.
Yeah, because I was wondering about your view on intentionality, because if you look at how things operate, if you look at things and you call things feature, you would say if the feature was broken, you'd say it was like it ought be fixed, not morally, but like you're saying like, oh, this is a feature, this has some function to it, and if it's operative, that's good, and if it's broken, we should fix it. Wouldn't that assume that there's some sort of like, not even a high capital T teleology? I won't try to pin you on that, but just like lower T, if you want to say that, like there's yeah, I guess that would be it. It's like the lower form of it, where it's like, at least in the local sense, you're going, oh, even with our bodies, like there's so much of our bodies that have some purpose, to the extent that if one of them fails, God forbid, you go to the doctor, and if they were consistent with like maybe a physicalist view, they'd say like, well, no, we're not fixing your heart, because that would be presupposing that it had some sort of accurate targeted purpose. It just kind of does what it does, and that's it. But lucky for you, we figured out how to make a bionic heart to put in, which, by the way, the bionic heart mimicking your real heart actually has real purpose. The purpose is to do what your heart did, but your original heart doesn't really have any real purpose to it. It's just kind of sort of accidental feature of the natural world. To me, that's like a somewhat incoherent, because every time we appeal to our brain and to our body, we're assuming that it has some sort of proper function, such that when it fails, we're upset. We're like, this ain't right. We have views on it. But if we were consistent from certain views, you shouldn't be upset, because nothing actually broke to begin with. It just did a thing. And before, when you thought it was doing a proper thing, that was an illusion. It wasn't actually properly functioning. It was just doing another thing. It was just things doing stuff. That's it.
Yeah, this is something that what you're mentioning right now is something that actually philosophers of biology have been talking about for quite some time. It's originally introduced by everybody's gonna fucking hate me for this one. It was introduced by Jerry Fodor, actually. Where he argued something similar that you at least appear to be arguing now, is that when we talk about biology and biological function and processes, that there seems to be some level of like normativity built into that, like that there's some sort of evaluative aspect with respect to like what it is that's going on and all of that, and that you can't account for that utilizing the biology alone. You need the biologists doing the interpretation in order to really understand these things. And I mean, I agree with that. I don't see how that, I don't think that would be problematic for me.
Well, as a physicalist, it might be, because wouldn't you agree that pure physicality has no aboutness?
Well, sure, but I think humans do.
Wait, but we're pure physicality, so.
Intention is something that emerges out of that.
Wait a second. It sounds like and I'm glad to hear it, but it sounds like you're making a special concession for humans, because you're saying humans are pure physicality, but pure physicality from a physicalist view, there's no aboutness of just matter itself. But for humans, there is, because we're special.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the thing that we refer to as intention, I think, like almost more basally, would be understood as some sort of like goal directedness or thought directedness, is just a feature of how our brains function.
Yeah, but right. So, but if it's just a feature,
understand it well enough to know what parts of the brain are involved in doing it.
Right, but feature, it's what's another word? How do you remove the meaning of feature, like the meaningful application of feature, and still have a similar word where you remove the proper function? Like feature says like, oh, look at this feature. Like there's no way we talk about features without them being specific directed functions towards something. So I know we're limited by analogous language, but I would challenge you, if you're a physicalist, to be even more rigorous. I think feature is being too generous with your view. Feature. It's a feature.
And there is a related question from Kurt. Thank you, Kurt. Do lanes on a road exist, or are they simply painting concepts?
Is that for who? You should. Is it for?
I think that's probably for both of y'all. Sorry, that's probably for both of y'all.
It's just a slab of material with slabs of material painted on.
That's right. The lane is the conceptual thing, right? The road is a physical thing with physical paint, just the way when you write down things in a book. The meaning and information in that is not identical to the ink and the pages, right? The information is actually not. It's funny. The information is not actually physically in a book. That's why I want to press you too on information. We didn't get to talk about it. I assume you read into information theory, but that's an interesting thing. You agree that if I open a book, Leo, the information isn't identical to the ink itself, the particles of the ink, or the particles of the fiber of the paper. And they're also not exactly identical to the symbols that are made, because the same symbol could mean a different thing to different cultures. So how do you is information something you also hold doesn't exist?
It would depend on how exactly we're utilizing the term information. The way that a physicist uses the word information, no, that's something that's real and physical. The way that a computer scientist uses it, I think, kind of teeters between something physical and maybe some sort of conceptual notion. But I would probably lean more towards physical. But yeah, I think there's certainly a usage of the term information in which we're referring to something that's purely conceptual.
Yeah,
and
like
in that sense, I would say then, yeah, that type of information doesn't exist.
Yeah, I look at information like data plus semantics. Like you could have pure data, but if you don't add the semantic part, you lose the syntax and you can't actually encode, and decode it. It's just scribble. You could try to make sense of it based on your prior knowledge of things, but that's why information and intentionality kind of go hand in hand to me, because you have to have a direction of what you're trying to communicate conceptually. But when we look at it from the definition of data plus semantics, there's actually nothing physical in the world that's information. It has to be interpreted, and the information is a conceptual element that's not physical. But that's the thing, is we differ here, because if you're a physicalist, you actually have to deny the existence of things that you always utilize and appeal to. But if you split reality into conceptual and abstract, then you might be like, well, shit, now I have to justify imaginary things. I don't like that. I'm not saying you would think that. I'm just saying, like, hyperbolically, I could see someone who's like a pure empiricist sort of scoffing and be like, damn it, I have to now admit that I actually hold to things that aren't empirically verified. And, I think that's fine. I think you not justify it, but I think it's fine to deal with that discomfort. Not that that's you, Leo. I'm just saying to the audience.
So I think the way that you defined information there, I mean, I could work with a definition like that, but that to me would just be information in some sort of maybe linguistic concept. I don't know if that's the way information would be understood in like a computer science term. I think that's more something called like Shannon information.
Shannon,
and then with respect to like information in the physical sense, I would just say that that's going to be the degrees of freedom of the state of affairs.
It is. I got it from an Italian information theorist who bridged it from Shannon. He got just a little more clear on it. But things like, what about physical? Like, if you're a physicalist, obviously you're using a term like physical about things. But then wouldn't you agree that physical itself doesn't exist? That's a concept.
Physical things exist. I think that's what it means to be physical.
Right, but physical, the word, and things are concepts. So what is it that's real that you're using something that doesn't exist to say that it is real? If physical things is not only conceptual, but it's a universal claim that there is something universal called physicality, and things, a collection or a concept of a category called items or particular things. I think you'd have to deny that the thing that you're using as a reference, physical things, they don't actually exist. But you're under the illusion that the external world, as you would, most reduced view of it, reality, or Tom Jump style, reality is reality. That thing out there, whether it's a set of particulars or a united giant monistic glob, you're saying you really believe that out there is real, but I am stuck with calling it something that I know isn't real. right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I use linguistic concepts and all that to understand and communicate the world around me. I
Yeah,
think everybody does that.
that's what I'm saying. Knowledge is impossible, because if you have a knowledge, justified true belief about the external world, but everything that you utilize to come to that view separates you further from the actual thing, I don't think a physicalist has coherent, at least their account of it, a coherent account of their access to the external world, because it goes through a non-existent tunnel. It's like, here I am in the external world, and over there is my knowledge of the external world, but I have to go through a tunnel that I don't actually believe exists to come out the other side and go, yeah, the world is like that. It does things like that. And you start saying things about the world, but I just can't really get through this problem of I'm not sure why you should trust any account of the thing you're referring to as the physical world out there if you're relying on a whole slew of things that don't pass your criteria for justified true belief. It's like it's like a leap.
They're primitive features of my perceptive experience of that external reality, which is why I think there is one. And I think it is our experience within this external physical reality, what I often call the world, that is the reason why we develop the kinds of concepts that we do, like mathematics, like logic,
you think
like the languages that we use. That's in virtue of us experiencing agents in a world.
Wait, do you think we discovered math and logic, or
No.
do we created it?
We created it.
Well, can you give me anything that's created that doesn't already? Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to equivocate here, or obfuscate. The laws of logic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you think we created the laws of logic?
Yes.
Okay. In order to create something, don't you have to appeal to all three classical laws to do the process of creating something?
I don't think so, no.
Is there anything you think you can create aside from logic that doesn't already assume identity over time?
Yeah, I think like if you cut down a tree and made a table, that doesn't.
Yeah, but the tree is an identity that's not the table, and cutting.
Sure.
You're using
you
something.
don't need to assume that to cut the tree down.
Wait. How do you cut a tree down without assuming that the tree isn't the chainsaw?
By using the chainsaw and cutting down the tree.
How do you have a chainsaw? Know what a chainsaw if you don't have the law of identity of a chainsaw?
Because we've made chainsaws.
No, but that would require the law of identity. I asked for something you can do or
the law of
make.
identity is descriptive.
What are you describing then?
All the people that built these things, they didn't know what the fuck the law of identity was.
Well, I know they don't know it descriptively, but the question is the necessity for the law of identity to exist in order to describe it. So I don't know there's anything, Leo, that you could describe that doesn't logically necessitate that it already exists. It has to exist to describe it.
And well, I mean, our linguistic systems are deeply tied to logics. Yes, we use logics to help formalize languages and means of communication and understanding. That's sort of what logics are.
No, I agree. Logic's the activity.
So yeah, any like broader linguistic system or communicative system is going to be based in some sort of logical schema.
I understand. I'm not talking about the activity of logic, like doing logic, the activity. I'm saying the laws of logic themselves classically. I'm saying that there's nothing you can create. Like the concept is, I'm going to create something or I'm going to do something. When you say that before you do it or before you create it, you're already assuming you're an identity. The external world is some type of identity. The parts of the world are an identity. Other people are identities. The tree is an identity. Everything maintains an identity. So when people say we created logic, you're talking about a collective of humans that need to already maintain their identity over time to then go, I'm going to create logic, which doesn't make sense because their identity preceded the creation of the law of identity. Like we can't say humans created the law of identity. We could only coherently say we discovered the law of identity maintains, and then we described that sort of phenomenon, right? That makes more sense to me.
Well, I mean, I think that we just observe that things are what they are, and then we say, hey, things are what they are, and they're not what they're not. And a thing can't be what it is and what it's not at the same time.
So then you agree that if a past preceded us, from your view and my view, that there was a time where we didn't exist and all humans maybe didn't exist, that world still operated under the law of identity. I'm not saying, like you said before, that the law of identity is some sort of like prescriptive sheriff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that world still abided by the law of identity before minds arrived to then describe the phenomenon. Obviously, the past, for every human, there was a moment where they didn't exist. For every human we know, there was a moment they didn't exist. So that means a reality existed before them that operated consistent with this law of identity. That's why I believe for people, when they say humans created the law of identity, I think that's logically, metaphysically impossible, because a world needed to exist in such a way for humans to even exist in the first place. And that world needed to abide by at least the 3 laws of logic. So I think we discovered these things. Now, the problem with that view is you also have to say, as a physicalist, the laws of logic, being conceptual, actually don't exist.
That's correct.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't think the laws of logic, or that the world abides by them. I think that they are descriptive features that we utilize.
Well, descriptions require logic is already in place. You can't describe anything unless you assume identity so that you could use language to describe identities. So identities need to exist before descriptions.
I mean, I don't know how true that is for the axioms of logic, but I mean, once you start working with them, yeah. If you already got a law of identity in place, yeah.
So you're saying in a deep, distant time in space before all humans existed, from your view, the law of identity had no ontology.
The law of identity doesn't have ontology.
The law of identity has no ontology.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I am a relatively hard nominalist about concepts and abstracta. I think that they are not things out in the world. They are features of our thought. And that is why we can still use them. There's a variety of things that do not exist and aren't out there in the world that we talk about all the time. And all this shows is that you can have a variety of concepts that don't refer to a thing out in the world necessarily, and they still have meaning. I mean, we could see this plainly in things like mathematics and logic, where there are certain axioms and what have you, and certain statements that can refer to things that aren't out there in the world, but are nevertheless very meaningful.
Now, do you agree you just made some truth statements?
Of course. Well, I think statements that at least I think are true.
Oh, that's fine. They're assuming truth, right? So does truth exist?
No, truth is not a thing out in the world.
Okay.
Truth is some feature of our languages.
So if the law of identity doesn't exist, then the deep time world view, where there's just like planets that are planets and they're not them, they abide by a rule. They don't violate the law of identity, but you're saying they can't violate the law of identity because the law of identity doesn't exist in that time frame.
Well, I mean, if by not violate the law of identity, you mean that like planets don't all of a sudden turn into like pink elephants or something.
That's
like
right.
That. Well, yeah, but that's not like, because there is this law that's like saying to the world, hey, planet, you can't turn into pink elephants. It's just, that's not the way the world works.
Well, no, the way the world works, the only way you have the statement, the way the world works, is because the law of identity.
The statement, perhaps, but the fact that the world just is what it is and does what it does, that's just the thing.
Wait a second.
Point of moderation, we've got just under 30 minutes left, and you have had the Inquisitor hat most of the, not saying it in a bad way, I'm just saying that most of the debate.
Sure.
And so in this back portion, if Leophilius decides to ask more questions or something, just to hit some inquisition done on his end, please be a little bit receptive to that. That would be greatly appreciated. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I don't mind him asking the questions. It doesn't bother me.
No, I know.
I like
Y'all
it.
are
I
both
like
very
it
chill.
sometimes
I'm not
when
complaining or anything.
yeah.
I was
But
just
there's times
bringing
when I
it up.
like it when somebody can just be a little bit inquisitive. I don't know. I feel like it vibes or it flows a little better sometimes.
Can I ask, were you always a physicalist, or
No,
what did you hold before this? Or
I was a Catholic.
well, that's kind of funny because they're
devout Catholic.
that's funny because they're still like their foundation, they you know, like their version of natural theology does kind of get rooted in empiricism a little bit. But that's interesting. So you then obviously investigated the claims, theistic claims generally, but higher resolution Catholic claims. And then were you just like cultural, or is it like like you were into it?
Yeah, no, I was a Catholic.
But I know, but a lot of people in America, especially, they're just like they're cradle culture.
Belief in God. I felt that I had a very and see this is something that I find interesting when I hear from people. And obviously, you haven't said this, but
Sure.
When people say, "Well, I don't think you believed hard enough," no, I felt that I had a very strong relationship with God when I was a Catholic, an extremely strong relationship with God. Like it wasn't something up until the point that I really started questioning. It hadn't been a question, so I just wanted to clarify that.
So did it occur to you that your belief in God was a justified true belief?
I think it was a justified belief. I would have said at the time that it's a justified true belief. Not
plus or plus?
I mean, I probably would have put the plus on it too, something like that.
And then do you remember, like, this is probably prior to you getting into philosophy, do you remember what standard you were using? Was it just intuitive and mostly feelings and kind of like experiential, like you were
I was probably a more of a stronger form of some sort of foundationalist back then. Because I did actually get in the last probably 3 or 4 years of actually being Christian, being religious. Got into like William Lane Craig and Alvin Plantinga and all of that stuff. So
William Lane
I
Craig
was quite familiar with some of the flaws. Well, I mean, a lot. Look, I understand that there's a lot of even Christians that don't like William Lane Craig, but he is one of the world's leading Christian philosophers. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah, at the time, I think that's
his debate with Christopher Hitchens, which I think he won. I think he actually had 2, maybe.
Wait, that's actually a good question. Not that it's totally relevant, but a lot of people thought. And I really I went through a 15-year pure atheist, love Sam Harris, kind of all those guys phase. But then Sam Harris is, at least he's just so boring. But Christopher Hitchens was so likable in his rhetoric and how he was, just like a curmudgeon-y guy and like good jokes. But looking back, that's someone I actually appealed to. And I looked back and I realized he actually didn't have like a lot of good arguments. He didn't.
He was very rhetorically skilled, and it was a lot of what he said was just a lot of like emotional rhetoric and stuff. And look, he was good at it. I'll give him that. And there were some things that he did say where it's like, okay, yeah, I get the point, but there wasn't, I don't think a whole lot of substance to a lot of what he said.
But it was effective.
Yeah,
so.
It was.
So you're saying like
I've never been into the Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss. I've always leaned more into the philosophy. Like when I started becoming more of an atheist, there was like Schellenberg and Draper and Mackey and.
What do you think of the state of atheism in the same? I know there's no real true state of atheism, but in online sort of, if atheism was a musical genre online, what do you think the state of it is now?
I mean, I don't think there's any like major issues with the community right now. I think maybe, and I think this is a problem that has been getting worked on and has gotten a lot better. I want to say that, but I still think maybe some inclusivity stuff could be worked on a little bit more with the atheist community online. And the biggest thing, there's just a wide array of very, very bright people with a lot of very, very interesting and intelligent things to say. but I do wish that there was a lot more philosophical rigor and a lot of the argumentation that flows out of the sort of the online atheist movement that dominates YouTube right now.
Yeah, like the main shows. Did you ever get asked to be a like? It seems like they kind of.
No, I don't think I'm the kind of person that like, and I don't have a problem with like Jimmy Snow or anybody like that. I don't know if they've got a problem with me. I don't really know a lot of the people that host it or run it, but I like if they invited me on, I would be like, sure, yeah, I'll do it. Depending on who I was with, there might be some people that I would prefer over others, but I haven't been invited on, and I probably don't think I will. And not that it's like I think anybody necessarily dislikes me. I don't think I might not be the kind of personality they're really looking for on that show. Not that I would be rude, mean, or disrespectful, but I am the kind of person, and I think the people that know me a little bit will agree that it's not afraid to match energy in a discussion.
Yeah.
And I tend to lean much more into a philosophical analysis in a discussion. You know, I want to actually hear the arguments. I want to hear the defenses so that I have something of substance to respond to. And actually try to respond with something of some meaningful substance that meaningfully engages with what's being said. And I think that there are some that do an okay job with that. And then there's some, I think, that there's a lot that they miss, and I think that a lot of it has to do with there could be just a touch more philosophical rigor in the engagement and in the argumentation, or at least that would be a preference of mine.
Yeah,
is for there to be a little bit more of that.
Yeah. Honestly, tacos, I don't know much more on the topic. We can go. I think if Leo is okay with it. If you want, we could go to chats and even hit the panel early, so we're not here for 19 hours.
I'm okay with that. I think we kind of reached a natural end of the discussion.
Cool. Let me put up.
What is that you're drinking? You said it's an IPA. I don't know why you said you have to take away that it's not beer. I mean, certain IPAs I can drink. I'm just not a big IPA fan, but I know that they are very, very popular.
Yeah, it's just like, it's
something drinkable. Yeah, I get it.
It just tastes like. I don't know why I like it. It tastes like earwax mixed with oranges. But
you sound like Dumbledore.
I'm moving over to. I don't know if this is a good thing, but I'm moving over to bourbon. I don't know if it's just gray in my hair, but that's where I'm heading.
But the thing is, I think if you can get your hands on good bourbon and you actually like enjoy it, that it's very much worth it.
Yeah,
a little bit of bourbon and some water and just something to kind of maybe sip on a little bit. And yeah, nothing wrong with that.
All right, so. I put up the poll for tonight's master debater.
Wait. Hold on. We need my audience to go over and fairly do the poll, right?
They can do that. Yeah, that's totally fine. It's at Met. I got to do the voice. At Mega Bloodbath on YouTube. And it's in the live stream. I just have the poll up. You can just vote for who you think is the winner. You got to do the voice, when you say it, or it doesn't have the same oomph.
Well, is you use OBS or not yet?
Kind of. I use it if I'm streaming a game or something.
Oh, okay.
Or something
there are plugins where you can click and do a stream, like a hotkey, and it'll give you an echo. Just so you know, you could do that.
I'll have to take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably swapping to Restream here in the next week. So probably tomorrow night I'm going to test it.
Test what?
So, read some features in Restream that I saw, and I just have to make sure they work. And if they work, I'm going to go all in on it. Yeah, so let's go ahead and go into the 8-minute closings. Jim Bob, you're the affirmative, so we'll start with you on that. You'll have 8 minutes. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll get that started.
Okay, I'm ready. First of all, thanks for having me. Thanks, Leo, for a very pleasant discussion. So the whole proposition was whether or not knowledge is possible under physicalism. Now, one of the key things that I was looking at is when you say knowledge is possible, when we talk about things that exist, we're actually, to me, we're talking about, can something exist? Is it possible to exist? It has to have some ontology. Is it possible? Now, I thought very quickly I found out that knowledge under the physicalist view, at least the one that Leo's holding, knowledge doesn't exist to begin with. So I'm just not sure what it means to say something's possible if it doesn't mean possible to exist. But if the position out the gate says knowledge actually doesn't exist and it's actually not possible to exist, I'm not sure in what way it's possible other than it existing in some way. Further, categories don't exist. Claims don't exist. Evaluations don't actually exist. Categories don't exist. A whole slew of things actually don't exist. Meaning doesn't exist. Truth doesn't exist was a statement that came out tonight. And these are all interesting positions. I think ultimately they end up being self-refuting because the thing you're claiming, you're also claiming doesn't exist. I mean, we got to a point in the debate where the claim was the debate itself doesn't exist. So I'm not sure what it is we're doing if the debate is, does knowledge exist if the debate itself doesn't exist? I mean, how could you have a debate about whether or not knowledge is possible under physicalism if debates themselves have no positive ontology? It's all an illusion. Further, when we look at the justified true belief system, I think it was key, and I actually never saw this before until now, that third element, that third necessary condition for something to be a justified true belief was something that included what we call a reliable process. But under the physicalist view, reliable processes don't exist. So in short, when you say, hey, do you have a justified true belief? And I say, I think so. And you go, well, it needs to pass this criterion. Well, by the way, criterion doesn't exist. That's a concept. What criterion? Well, a couple of things, but most importantly, you have to present good evidence. Evidence, another concept that doesn't exist. Reasons also don't exist. Reliable processes don't exist. So what's interesting is that if you have a justified true belief under physicalism, it has to pass this criterion. But the thing is, the criterion itself doesn't pass the criterion for being a justified true belief. So you're basically telling people, hey, you should believe true things. And I go, yeah, how do I do that? And you say, well, first you have to believe in these false things, and it has to pass the test of false things to then be a true thing. To me, that's a contradiction. To me, that doesn't make any sense. You're not holding consistently your criterion for what's considered a justified true belief. The question of the night actually wasn't necessarily do justified true beliefs exist. The question was whether or not knowledge exists. And if knowledge doesn't exist and it can't exist under physicalism, there's no way you could possibly argue that it's possible. What's possible? Non-existent things? How can a non-existent thing that can't definitionally exist under physicalism be possible? It can't be possible. And one thing I appreciate about Leo is that he was actually 100% consistent. 100% consistent. Now, I think he committed contradictions, but at least he was consistent in saying, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet. Truth doesn't exist. This doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. None of those things exist. So in closing, I know this was bloodbath. I'm sorry on behalf of myself and Leo. We did not spill any blood. We didn't even spill our drinks. But nonetheless, I think it was good change up. It was a bubble bath. It was a good change up in I think the lineup anyway, and I'm glad that we had the conversation in the debate. So thanks.
Thank you. And do you mind if I share and I meant to say StreamYard. There's some StreamYard features I'm going to test. But do you mind if I share the Restream link with your chat if any of them would like to join us?
Absolutely. Yeah, do it. Yeah,
Perfect.
Just post it in the chat. Yeah.
Perfect.
Or
if it stops me, I'll just put it in the back chat.
Well, yeah, put it in the back, actually, because mine will be active if I post it in my chat.
Gotcha. It's right there.
Okay, thanks.
And then, Leo,
You're?
8 minutes. Let me know when you're ready.
You've
got 8 minutes.
So, I'm just, I guess right off the bat, I don't think I saw any, or anything that makes me think that there's a contradiction in physicalism being true and in people having knowledge. Concepts don't exist. This is standardly nominalism in metaphysics about concept, about abstracted. A very large minority. I mean, it's almost a 50-50 split when you look at philosophers with respect to like some form of Platonism versus nominalism. So it's very much. I'm not citing that to say that that makes it correct or anything, but just to show that it's a respectable view that a large minority of philosophers hold to. Concepts don't exist; they're not things out in the world. But that being the case, doesn't mean that these aren't features of the cognitive faculties that humans have that are not just contained within the individual humans, but are a part of the shared experiences that humans have primarily through things like language, which is why language is going to be a very, very important part of these kinds of discussions. And when you talk about things like knowledge and truth, which relate heavily to languages, and it's primarily through languages that these notions propagate and are understood. Now, perhaps if somebody wants to say that these things do exist in virtue of, like, say, consisting in all of these various cognitive processes within humans and between humans in a society through a variety of shared languages and what have you, then I mean, I think somebody could do that. I think that would be a fair enough view, and perhaps they do exist in some sense like that, but concepts don't exist. I would say that concepts don't exist the way that Santa Claus doesn't exist, or the way that, leprechauns or fairies or dragons don't exist. But we can still talk about them. I mean, nobody's going to say that because dragons don't exist, you can't talk about dragons. So it seems that the object of what we're speaking about, having no real ontology, doesn't bear on whether or not it's something that's meaningful to us and that we can talk about. So and that's why it's easy for me to just say, yeah, these things don't exist, because at the end of the day, I don't actually think I'm saying anything that's entirely that controversial. So, like I said, this is something that's held to by a large minority of philosophers today. So I think that's really all I have to say about all that. Actually, just I want to thank Jim Bob. I think this was a phenomenal discussion.
Yeah, no, bro.
I like it sometimes people are inquisitive on my views and I get the chance to sort of straight up defend them that way. It's kind of interesting to me. And like I said, it's bubble bath, not a bloodbath, but nevertheless, I think it was a really good discussion.
Cool. Yes, thank you both of you for such a great discussion. And I realized you had asked me to hold this one back, Jim Bob. I think you said it was like off topic or something. But,
yeah, for the time at least.
What do you? Oh, you're muted right now.
Oh shit. Yeah. At the time, it was just going to be it's going to send me off in a different direction. And
so Austin was asking, what do you do if evidence from God's world contradicts your faith in God's word? Do you reject / reinterpret the evidence from God's world or faith?
Well, the question itself assumes evidence is a real thing. So from my view, evidence doesn't exist without the preconditions for evidence that can only be justified from God. So I'm not an evidentialist, first of all. I'm not a classical foundationalist or anything like that. And so when you say, what do you do if evidence from God's world contradicts your faith? I think that's a logical impossibility from my view, because evidence itself at the philosophical level requires a justification that's outside of humans doing our thing right here. And like Leo said today, there is a whole slew of categories that he said, and many should say, honestly, you should say, I can't justify him. I just can't justify him. I push it further. I go, well, what if we could? What if we could say evidence being conceptual, the word evidence being an assumption that truth exists, that has some sort of ontology we could access? Well, that requires some absolute standard. So generally speaking, that's God. Now, there could be evidence that moves people away from notions of God. I'm fine with that, right? I actually take logical arguments as a type of evidence, not the same category as like physical evidence, but I take logical arguments as evidence. So he says, do you reject, interpret evidence? No. Again, like this item of evidence relies on a whole transcendental category, and that's what I would call it. Leo would call it the conceptual category that doesn't actually exist. I would say it exists in the way concepts exist. They're not the same as material, but concepts, from my view, are mind-oriented. They actually need to be grounded in a mind. So in that sense, the short bridge I take to orthodoxy is divine conceptualism. So,
gotcha. And there was a clarification question